how's everyone doing? I hope everyone is doing great. I hope that 2021 is still going strong for you guys, and I hope that you guys are all safe and sound. So for this video, I'm gonna go ahead and review the new computer that I got. If not the last video, the video before, I had mentioned that I got a new computer, so I'm really excited to be sharing all of the information about the new computer. I think I'm gonna go ahead and start off by giving my, overall thoughts. I really like the computer. I think it's very, very efficient. It's very powerful, and it does what it says it's gonna do, basically, based on the hardware that's attached. The reason I'm bringing that up is because I feel like if I tell you right off the bat, if you're, wanting to relax, but you're also interested, at least okay, so when I'm not tired, I can come back to the video and basically look at this computer that he's talking about. Because if not, you can just say, okay, I'm not even gonna bother. I'll just use the rest of the video to sleep. So, if you'd prefer a more traditional approach, please let me know and I can work with that. So, but yes, I am satisfied with the computer. I'm proud and happy that I got it. It is a bit pricey, but given the circumstances of all of the hardware, it's worth the money. I've only had it for less than a week, but I've been pushing it to the test, and it's pretty good. So the computer that I'll be reviewing today, the computer that I got, is an ABS Gladiator gaming PC. I got it on Newegg. I will post a link in the description. As of this video, they're sold out. But before getting this computer, I was thinking about getting another computer off of Best Buy. It was a little bit pricier, but overall the same specs. But they sold out of that one, and I think I got an email a week later telling me that they were back in stock. So I'm a little optimistic on ABS getting stock of these computers. So if you're really interested in it, just keep checking back for a few days, and hopefully that you'll be able to get it. So what does this computer have? Well, in my notes to the side, it's got an Intel i7 10700F processor that runs at 2.9 gigahertz normally, and if overclocked, it runs at 4.8 gigahertz. It's got 8 cores with 16 threads. It also has an Asus Dual GeForce RTX 3070. It's a 3070 with 8 gigs of video memory, or 8 gigabytes of video memory. It's got a deep cool Cam Max GTE version 2 CPU cooler. I don't know if I've posted a video of what it looks like when it's turned on, but if not, you'll notice that the CPU cooler and the fans on the case are RGB, which that's a lot of fun for me because I love RGB peripherals, RGB equipment. It just makes your computer shine, in my opinion. Then you've got the G-Skill Ripjaw V. I don't know if it's a V or if it's a 5. I'll be honest, I'm not too familiar with that. G-Skill Ripjaw 5, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory that run on at 3200 megahertz, 3200 megahertz. It's also got a 1 terabyte Intel 600B M.2 one end of the NVMe SSD is basically got the pins, and you insert that directly to the motherboard if your motherboard supports M.2 NVMe SSDs. So it's got so the case, if you're wondering, it's an Asus TUF Gaming GT301 mid tower. It's got a deep cool 750 watt 80 plus gold power supply. And I thought I mentioned this, but I guess I skipped it. The motherboard is an Asus TUF Gaming B460M plus Wi-Fi 6. So this motherboard has built-in Wi-Fi, but unlike laptops, an antenna is required, and you can connect that to the back of the motherboard, or where all the I/O stuff is, where you can connect your keyboards, your mouse, your mice, headphones, displays, so on and so forth. So, what are the pros of this computer? The ABS Gladiator Gaming. So the pros, it looks really cool with RGB lights. I'm not gonna lie. As you saw in the video, I really like that. It has a lot of lights, and I don't have video for it, but I managed to sync it up to the Razer Synapse program, because I have a Razer Lancet mice. Well, I technically do have two Lancet mice. One is wired and one is wireless. But I've been using the wireless one because I get the same performance. And I can, play from the comfort of my bed, but that's neither here nor there. But because I have a Razer Lancet mouse, I have the Synapse program, and I was able to download something that would sync up the mouse, the fans, and the CPU cooler. So now, it cycles through colors, and if there's sound, depending on the loudness of the sound, it will flash. I think the loudest is purple. I don't remember off the top of my head, but let's say purple is the loudest. If there's this loud boom, it'll flash purple, and then it'll start, as the sound starts dying down, it'll cycle through the colors. I think blue is the lowest, we'll say. Or no, actually, red is the lowest. So it'll go from purple to blue to green, and then the yellow, red. So I like that a lot. It's got a 3070, which that's hard to come by. At the very least, it's hard to come by affordably. So I don't want to go off on a tangent, but if you're not aware, these new cards have been released at a significantly lower price than their previous predecessors. I think the 20 series, the cheapest one you can get is 500, and that's the low end. And for the last gen, the top end, I think you would have to pay $1,200. The 30 series, I think $1,200 will get you the max. But the 3070 cost $500, or it's supposed to, and the 2070 costs $700. So there's definitely a significant markup. Now, they may have lowered the prices. I haven't looked at the 2070s. Actually, now that I think about it, I think they're about the same. I think the ones that were really scouted, the ones that scalpers really wanted, 3070s are much more powerful than the 2080s. So people were like, well, we need this. So that's one of the pros in my opinion, because it's like, you can't get the 3070 alone. That was my original plan, because I wanted to kind of start upgrading my computer slowly, but because I couldn't find the parts, I had to go and buy a pre-built computer. I mean, it saved me some time, but you know, it is what it is. It's got mainly new components, the processor and the graphics card. Those are like pretty important stuff, but I'm not so sure that the memory and the power supply are new. I question if the motherboard is not new either, because it doesn't have any USB-C ports, which that's not a huge deal, but my old computer, it has a USB-C port. So I am wondering if the motherboard's a slightly older one. So, but I don't know. Whenever I play games, there's pretty much no lag. Like, that is great. Like, that's what I want. I will say, the one caveat that I have with that is, I have the NVMe, and then I have a hybrid drive connected to it. This was one that I had lying around. The hybrid drive performs slower, of course, because a hybrid drive is both mechanical and SSD. But the only reason it performs slower is because, like, the storage space is mechanical, but when it comes to like the caching, from my understanding, it saves it onto the quote-unquote SSD part of the drive. In other words, if you are playing a game, it's going to save that into the cache, so the next time that you load it up, it loads faster. It's by no means an SSD, but it does have better performance than a traditional all-around mechanical drive. Mechanical drives have disks, whereas SSDs only have cells. But even with the hybrid drive, I don't notice that much of a lag. So that's definitely a plus. In terms of like how it looks like aesthetically, like the case, like I know I mentioned the RGB lights, but looking past the RGB, like it's very well organized. Like looking at the case, it looks wonderful. Like I know some people will put like little action figures in the computer, or they'll put little monitors basically saying, oh, how old is the computer? What are the speeds of the fan? So on and so forth. I think ABS did a wonderful job in organizing the cables, and I think this case is very capable of doing that as well. So, and then finally, I think it's got 5 SATA ports. I know it has 5, it may have 6, but for me that means like I can connect a lot of hard drives, and as long as I can find room, it's like, hey, let's go for it. So, which means that I can store up to, I normally get 2 terabyte SSDs, but SSDs can be pretty expensive, so I try to buy like one at a time. So, as with all good things, there's also bad things. So, the cons, the motherboard. The other reason I think the motherboard is older is because even though the memory sticks can go up to 32 megahertz, the motherboard had, what's the phrasing? It throttles the speed originally. I think when I first started the computer, I think the memory speed was 2100. And after modifying the BIOS, it only goes up to 2933 megahertz. So 2933 megahertz. So it's still not reaching that full capability, which is a little upsetting, because that means that you're not getting that higher performance, but it's not the end don't really notice any issues. I think the last time, like I said, I had issues was when I first started using it, so, and it could have just been user error. Like, I might be a nerd, I might be smart, but I'm still human, and I make dumb mistakes sometimes, so. So, the other thing was, I mentioned in the pros that I was able to sync up my mouse with the fans and the CPU cooler, but by default, the fans and the CPU cooler operate differently. Like, the CPU cooler goes through AuraSync. I didn't mention it before, but the motherboard has like a particular spot in the, if you're looking at the case in the top right, it's got a little bit of RGB strip in the motherboard. So, because the motherboard is made from ASUS, it's using the ASUS AuraSync. So the motherboard and the CPU cooler were in sync, but the fans were not. I had to actually look through and see how I can get the fans, the CPU cooler, and the motherboard to all be in sync. And eventually I figured it out. It wasn't hard, it's just more of like a nitpicky thing. It's like, you couldn't have synced it up before you shipped it. But, I can't really complain too much. Once I synced up everything, the fan, the CPU cooler, and the motherboard, I then found a way to sync up my mouse with all that, with a program called Aura Connect. If you Google Aura Connect, you should be able to find it. It should be a GitHub page. So, again, not really a heavy con, but it is something that I would like to point out. So if you end up buying this computer and you're like, well, what's going on? Why aren't the fans syncing with the CPU cooler and the motherboard? That's why. So, just a heads up on that. So the RTX card blocks some of the SATA ports. It's not really a con, but like if you're wanting to upgrade or add new hard drives to the computer, you may want to keep that in mind. You might have to take out the RTX card if you decide to add more hard drives to it. So, the CPU cooler blocks some memory slots. Again, I've got 16 gigs of memory. I'm pretty satisfied with it. I don't think I need to add any more. If I need to, I will, but as of now, I don't have any needs to add memory. But if you are the kind of person that wants to add, 32 gigs of memory onto a computer, just do keep that in mind, that you will need to remove the CPU cooler before adding more memories of stick. Adding more sticks of memory. It's got no optical drive. That means you can't burn CDs or play CDs, or even think about getting a CD drive to put in the computer. You can always get an external CD drive, but you can't get one that you could connect via a SATA port and basically push it inside the computer. You have to get one that's an external CD drive, which nowadays we don't really use CDs. Like, movies are delivered digitally, and of course, music, you can download it from iTunes or Google Play, or just download something. Like, some music providers will let you pay and download a copy of the of the music. But it is just kind of a heads up that there is no opportunity to add an optical drive. When I was adding the hard drive, this is another con. So when I was adding the hard drive, I had to open up not the clear side of the computer, but the other side, and it's organized. But if you're trying to add new components, it's a bit difficult. They've organized it so well that would say 5 to 7 minutes. Adding a hard drive is pretty easy if it's straightforward and you have easy access to it. But if it's more difficult, obviously it's going to take more time. I think it took me 10 to 15 minutes total just because I had to figure out where the cables went. I had to figure out why I couldn't get the cables to go through. And I personally chalk that up to being impatient. I was more like, I want to add more games. I don't want to add them to my SSD. I want to add them to the hybrid. But I do point that out because if that's not something you do normally, it might take you a little bit longer because you're gonna need to make sure you don't unplug anything. Like for me, I was so impatient, but I was careful. I was just like, okay, make sure I didn't unplug this, connect this, pass it through here. Oh, it's stuck. What's it stuck on? And admittedly, I was impatient. But if this is something like you're starting to do, like if you are like opening up computers and adding hard drives manually, like you want to be careful. I think APS did a good job in organizing their cables, but at the same time, because of how organized they are, it does make it a little bit harder to keep track of times where your cable needs to go. So there is that. And again, it may have been due to impatience, but I am mentioning that to those who are new to this particular field. You're going to want to take your time and make sure you're not as impatient as I am, because you could risk unplugging something and you don't want that. So, and then finally, it took forever to get here. That is my last con. Like, holy crap, I ordered it like February 12th and I didn't get it like almost 2 weeks later. Like, what the heck? It's not really a con, that's just me being nitpicky. Honestly, a lot of the cons are me being nitpicky. With the exception of like the motherboard being older and like the RTX card and the CPU cooler blocking some of the ports. I mentioned those because it's important to understand that if you're wanting to upgrade and you're expecting an easy upgrade, it's not going to be as easy as you thought. But I think it's a good starter computer for sure, and with the specs that it has, like, you don't need to upgrade your computer for a little bit, so you can't go wrong with that. I did notice before I bought the computer that people were mentioning that they were having issues with the CPU cooler, and I think that may have been because they were overclocking. They didn't really specify, they just kind of pointed out that the CPU cooler was a pain, or that it wasn't great. And something that I didn't write on my list of cons, but let me, before I go on a tangent, they were complaining about the power or the CPU cooler, and I haven't had any problems with it. I think it works fine. I don't know if they got a bad one or what, but I haven't had problems. If I have any problems, though, I'll make another video and keep you guys updated. I didn't list this in my list of cons, but the power supply that's in my older computer is better than the power supply that came with this computer. In terms of wattage, my older power supply is 850 watts, whereas this one is 750. It's not going to be a huge deal if all you're doing is adding hard drives, but if you end up swapping components like a graphics card or a motherboard or so on and so forth, it's important to make sure that your computer can handle it. Honestly though, if you're going like in the 750, 850, you're pretty much set. So, but I did want to point that out, that it is weaker than, or it's less capable, I guess I should say, than my older one. But I don't know how new this power supply is, so it is possible that it may have less wattage, but it performs more efficiently. Like, I don't know. I'm not an electrician, I'm not an electrical engineer, so I can't really tell you the specifics of that. But 2077. I think it's a very good game to basically benchmark the computer, especially given its reputation of being buggy after being in production for 8 years or so. But I also wanted to test it because it also had ray tracing capability. Not all games, as of February 28th, not all games have ray tracing capabilities. So the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 had ray tracing capabilities, I wanted to try it out, but unfortunately the gameplay that I have, I don't think it does a good job showing the ray tracing. I'm not saying it doesn't show any ray tracing at all, but I think there are certain aspects where it could have been better. Like where the scene that I chose, I mainly chose that scene because I wanted to see how the game, or how the computer handled the game, and as you're seeing, it's flawless. There's no frame rate drop, or not a significant one. I think it teeters between 61 and 60 frames, but there's not a definitive example of ray tracing. If you look closely, there will be some examples throughout the gameplay video, but there's not a whole lot. Like I said, I was just wanting to benchmark the game, because I know my older computer, like that particular scene was so laggy, but with this new one, it played like a charm. So maybe at some point I'll try other ray tracing games and see if I can give you see if I can tell you, hey, here's a better example of where ray tracing is occurring. But like I said, I think for now that's a good benchmark at how the computer runs, and as you're seeing, or as you saw, I mean, it ran really, really well. So, if you're wondering why it's only at 60 frames per second, it's because at the time I was connected to a monitor that could only go to 60 frames. So, I'm not entirely sure, but I think this can go up to 4K. It could definitely go up to 4K, but I don't know if it can go up to 4K 60 Hz. I think it may only go up to 4K at 30 Hz. I'll have to do some more research, but either way, like, I'm with 1080p, I think that's really great. I think it runs well, and I'm satisfied as a customer with the ABS Gladiator. So I think they did a good job putting this together, and like I said, I'm satisfied. I'm content. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. If you'd like me to review anything else, like games or technology or something, feel free to let me know. I do plan on reviewing my tablet at some point, but I'll go ahead and say that for another day because I've been recording videos for a couple of hours now and I want to take a break. Since I do this for a hobby, I don't want to burn myself out. So, anyway, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I did get a new ring light. I turned off all the lights to see how it works, and I like how it looks, but if you'd prefer me to have the lights on, or if you prefer me to use a different light, please let me know. I want to make this as nice as possible. So, anyway, this is Benny signing off. I will see you guys next time. Until then, I wish you nothing but good health and good fortune and happiness. Just good vibes all around.